This podcast is an invitation to feel and experience the souls of famous old Hollywood homes and to have an in-depth journey to the areas where they're located through interviews with longtime residents. Either you're a fan of old Hollywood in Los Angeles, planning to have a vacation, or, an even bigger step, considering a certain area for your future home. This is your opportunity to receive valuable information and insightful advice you won't find anywhere else.
Hello, and welcome to my podcast. Are you in the mood for California? Today we'll feel and experience what healing truly means here in Los Angeles, featuring an interview with wonderful Jennifer Herrera.
My experience of Los Angeles before I left was, I felt, for whatever reason, I really just saw it more of the Hollywood scene. I didn't have any experience over what we would call over the hill, because I was mostly in the valley. I didn't have a car, so I didn't get to explore more beyond like going to the beach and stuff, which we did as a kid. So I didn't really get to experience all of what Los Angeles has to offer. And I had a little bit of a negative experience of it, just feeling like the Hollywood, or what I experienced back then, which is, I'm dating myself, but a few decades, what it felt like the superficiality is what I experienced of Los Angeles. And then, I'll fast forward many years later, but really after having lived 4 years in Manhattan, where I consider I was kind of adulting in many ways for the first time, I came back to Los Angeles, and it took me a minute, but I really started to say, oh my goodness, look at all this here.
Masha Korpacheva is a California-based realtor and a member of the National Association of Realtors in Los Angeles. She's an advocate for selling and buying homes with soul and practicing mindfulness in real estate. With master's degrees in spiritual psychology and linguistics, Masha brings all of her skills to work with her clients. An intuit and empath, she has touched many lives with her outstanding ability to see beyond the visible and helping to come to better understanding of issues and their resolutions. An adventurous world traveler, from climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania to exploring the Galapagos Islands, Masha has a particular passion for the City of Angels. Having landed in this paradise and adopted it as her home, she's been sharing old Hollywood stories since 2007. In the mood for California, feel the soul of old Hollywood.
And now, are you ready to explore what healing truly means in Los Angeles? In the 20th century, Los Angeles became more than a city of sunshine and cinema. It quietly grew into a world center for spirituality, consciousness, and healing. While Hollywood projected dazzling stories on the screen, a quieter revolution was unfolding in yoga studios, meditation halls, and living rooms across the Southland. The roots of this movement trace back to the early 1900s, when waves of seekers arrived in Los Angeles looking for health, freedom, and possibility. The city's very landscape seemed to invite it. With its wide open skies, dry climate, and reputation as a place where one could start over, Los Angeles attracted not only dreamers but visionaries. Health seekers came west for the clean air, believing it could cure tuberculosis. Artists and philosophers soon followed, drawn to the desert light and the idea of remaking life outside of old traditions. But beneath the search for fresh air and new beginnings was something deeper. People came because they longed to feel whole. Spiritual healing in all its forms speaks to a universal human truth that life brings pain, separation, and longing. Some seek relief from illness, others from heartbreak or a sense of disconnection. What they discover is that healing is not only about curing the body, it is about remembering the self, finding peace, and reconnecting to something larger. It was here in 1924 that the Indian spiritual teacher Paramahansa Yogananda founded the international headquarters of the Self-Realization Fellowship. Perched on the cliffs of Pacific Palisades, his Self-Realization Fellowship Lake Shrine and other temples offered something radical to Americans of the time: yoga and meditation as a pathway to inner peace. Yogananda taught that transformation begins when a person accepts responsibility for their own inner life. To sit in silence, to meditate, was to acknowledge that healing comes not only from outside remedies, but from within. His book, Autobiography of a Yogi, would later inspire generations, including influential figures like Steve Jobs and George Harrison. But Yogananda was only one voice in a growing chorus. In 1906, the Azusa Street revival in downtown Los Angeles ignited modern Pentecostalism, a movement emphasizing direct experience of the divine through healing, speaking in tongues, and ecstatic worship. People came because they believed that by opening themselves fully, they could experience not just relief, but renewal. By mid-century, Los Angeles was home to a patchwork of spiritual communities that reflected its diversity. In 1950s and 60s, the city became a hub for the human potential movement, a blending of psychology, spirituality, and alternative healing. The Esalen Institute in nearby Big Sur became famous, but Los Angeles was where many of its practices, encounter groups, gestalt therapy, body work, meditation, found eager participants. These movements emphasized a powerful idea that human beings have within them untapped strength, and that by taking responsibility for their growth, they can transform not just their personal lives, but the world around them. The counterculture of the 1960s and 70s only deepened this identity. Yoga studios, health food stores, and holistic healing centers bloomed across Los Angeles. Figures like Krishnamurti, who established the Krishnamurti Foundation in Ojai, just outside LA, attracted seekers from around the world. The city also became central to the rise of New Age spirituality, with bookstores like the Bodhi Tree in West Hollywood serving as gathering spots for spiritual explorers. These were places where people learned that healing was not passive, it was active, it was a choice. When one human being accepts responsibility for their own healing, they shift from being a victim of life's circumstances to a participant in their own evolution. Why Los Angeles, you may ask? The answer lies in its character. The city was young, free from centuries of tradition and hierarchy. Unlike East Coast cities bound by old institutions, Los Angeles offered room to experiment. Its immigrant diversity meant new philosophies, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, indigenous practices could mingle freely. The entertainment industry helped spread these ideas too. Celebrities lent visibility and legitimacy to practices that once seemed fringe. By the end of the 20th century, Los Angeles was firmly established as the epicenter of a new kind of spiritual landscape, one that was pluralistic, experimental, and centered on personal transformation. From yoga and meditation to sound baths, crystal healing, and mindfulness, many practices now considered mainstream first took root in the fertile soil of Southern California. Los Angeles, the city of reinvention, became not only the capital of dreams on screen, but also a capital of inner exploration. For countless people, it became the place where they learned that healing begins the moment you choose to awaken, when you take responsibility for your own path and discover that in doing so, you not only change yourself, but add more light to the world. And here we are. Welcome to Los Angeles. I'm so happy to have Jennifer Herrera join me today. Jennifer Herrera is a Los Angeles born writer, speaker, and educator devoted to emotional mastery, conscious leadership, and the healing of inherited patterns. She hosts the podcast Heal Your Part, a space for honest conversations, self inquiry, and the kind of personal healing that ripples outward into collective change. With over 2 decades of experience studying human behavior and supporting leaders across industries, she now guides high achieving women in reclaiming their self awareness, creative power, and capacity for meaningful wealth. Her work is rooted in the belief that healing is the gateway to deeper purpose and that everyone deserves to live in alignment with their soul's truth. And today, Jennifer will share her journey and her Los Angeles with us. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello.
Thank you so much for finding the time to participate in my podcast today. I really appreciate it.
I'm excited. I really just appreciate you inviting me. I'm excited to talk with you.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. It's not often that I have native Angelinas on my podcast, and you are one of those very rare people.
I love that. I love that. It's so funny because when I was growing up, and then maybe we'll get into that if we have time, but I don't know that I would have always owned that with such pride, but I do now. So that's exciting.
Yes, yes. And you actually did leave Los Angeles for about a decade, and then you returned in 2012. And probably you found the city a little bit different from the way it was when you left. So, how would you describe your Los Angeles now? The vibe, the pulse, the places that maybe nourish your spirit?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. I think what's first important to share is that what really the filter of which I experience my existence is really as instead of a human with a soul having a human experience. And I say that because I really believe that how we see things is really through our own eyes and the lenses we're looking through. And this is a great example of it because I grew up here. I grew up in what I was probably what they would call a valley girl.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up with a single mom, a single income household. So my experience in growing up wasn't with a lot of financial resources. And a lot of my friends definitely had more than me.
No worries.
That being said, my experience of Los Angeles before I left was I felt for whatever reason, I really just saw it more of the Hollywood scene. I didn't have an experience over what we would call over the hill because I was mostly in the valley. I didn't have a car, so I didn't get to explore more beyond like going to the beach and stuff, which we did as a kid. So I didn't really get to experience all of what Los Angeles has to offer. And I had a little bit of a negative experience of it, just feeling like the Hollywood or what I experienced back then, which is, I'm dating myself, but a few decades, what it felt like the superficiality is what I experienced of Los Angeles. And then, I'll fast forward many years later, but really after having lived 4 years in Manhattan, where I consider I was kind of adulting in many ways for the first time, I came back to Los Angeles and it took me a minute, but I really started to say, oh my goodness, look at all this here. So the vibe shifted because I shifted. And now I was actually living more so on the West Side, but I got to get to know Los Angeles as a full bodied, diverse, you need a car, unlike Manhattan, but there is the arts, the music, the people, obviously the food. So it was a transformational experience from one experience to the next.
Yes, yes, it sounds like it. And what neighborhood feels most like home and why?
Well, I feel like my pause is that I really feel like near the ocean is really where I feel most at peace. And I do still go to the valley, for example, for my hair appointments. And every time I drive down Ventura Boulevard, I feel like these are my roots.
Interesting. Well, and you did mention then when you were a child, that you came to the ocean once in a while. So that must also give you this feeling of carefree and enjoying the sunshine and swimming.
Yes. I mean, I think that one of the things I love about the ocean and even being in the mountains is that when I'm confronted, with the enormity of nature, I feel
Mhm.
also very comforted by that. And that's how I feel about the ocean. And I do have a lot of fond memories as a child swimming in the Pacific Ocean along like Zuma. And there was, I think it's still called that, but Will Rogers Beach was the beach that we went to when I was a child.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. So you must have like some really nice memories about that beach.
I do. It was sweet. I mean, back in the day, I think it's obviously different when you're coming from this area, but when you're coming from the San Fernando Valley, it's a whole day excursion, right? So like
Yes.
mom's preparing the food. We've got, umbrellas, we've got chairs, we've got toys, we've got blankets. And I had a mom who really cared about the environment before it was ever really trendy. So we were also having to clean up a lot of the beach before we left. So it was a very fun experience, and it definitely has a lot of nostalgia for me as well.
Oh, that's beautiful. Maybe you could share a few of your favorite local spots. I know we were talking about both the valley and the ocean, but maybe there are some favorite places of yours, like cafes or parks or trails, maybe like some hidden corners of Los Angeles that really energize or ground you.
Yes, there are so many good spots in Los Angeles. Well, I will tell you, I was at one of them yesterday, and it's newer to me, but I just adore it. It's called the Recreation Cafe.
Mm-hmm.
It's on Washington and West, and it is owned by this young man named Nick, and he's just really all about community. And it's just got a cool spot, indoor, outdoor. He has like art nights, he has open mic nights. The food is excellent, the coffee is amazing. So I love that spot. And
Mm-hmm.
something that's actually not too far away is called Highly Likely. And they actually have a couple locations, but I've primarily been to the one that's on, I believe it's on Jefferson, again, kind of in that West Adams area.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also local to Playa del Rey. In the Playa del Rey proper, which is like right on the ocean, there's a lot of like small business owners that have been there for a long time. And there's a spot down there called Cafe Milan. And I think anyone who's been around here long enough knows about Cafe Milan. And they have just delicious, their food is really good. And it just, you feel like it's our version of like Cheers, the TV show where you show up to the bar,
Uh-huh.
everybody knows your name. It's that experience. So I would say that as it relates to food. And then the other thing I would offer that I think is so rich here is our art scene. Like there's an exhibit at the Hammer that I want to get to before the end of the month. I watched the Broad being built, and that was a tremendous experience. And I love that museum. And LACMA has free jazz every Friday night for like 8 or 9 months of the entire year. So LA is like, it's not Vegas, but it's pretty much alive all the time.
Yes, yes, so vibrant, and any scene you can think of, you can find in Los Angeles. I absolutely agree with you. Well, let's talk about your work because it's quite interesting. The way you actually describe your work is as helping high achieving women come home to themselves and not to fix, but to remember who they truly are. And then your own career spans fashion retail, tech startups, nonprofits, academia, and even healthcare during the pandemic. So, how did your own journey of coming home unfold? And how did these diverse experiences across industries and contexts inform and shape the approach that you bring to self mastery and healing work today?
Thank you for that question. That's a beautiful question. Yes, I mean, I feel like you painted the picture so beautifully. And hindsight, now I can see like the full bodied and the robustness of my life that I'm very grateful for. I mean, I am a Gen Xer, so I feel like I am part of in a way a generation that is really shifting because I came into the world thinking that a good life was, you go to school or you get a job, find your partner, you have a family, you buy a home, that's it. And mine, I held that dream for myself for sure, but it never actually quite was what I was ever pursuing. And now I can see things like, I was very driven by a mother who struggled financially. I really wanted that to not be my experience. And then I was a hard worker, and I'm somebody who's very engaged and loves and is deeply, unendingly curious about people and humans. So I found my way working at the Gap Inc., actually for Banana Republic back in the late 90s. And it was a budding, beautiful, powerful retail concept when the mall was still like the beginning of the transition away from actually department stores into specialty.
Mm-hmm.
And I share all that because it really launched me in so many ways. It helped me when you're managing a retail store that is open 7 days a week and is very much driven by the numbers of your sales every day. You're challenged to learn so much with people, with customers. I actually feel like if you don't work in retail or work in a restaurant, you've missed some critical life training.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it just, it helped me see who I am and what I care about. And that is that I am somebody who is a natural leader. I am somebody who cares very much about people and humans. And for some reason, starting back then, I started to notice that we spend a lot of time at our jobs, in our professions, and that the opportunity for that experience to be really powerful for everybody, not just the hierarchical structure of the higher ups, but for everybody, I felt was such an opportunity, and sometimes a missed opportunity. But that became kind of like the impetus that I can see now very clearly throughout my career. And the last role I was in healthcare was not something that I was not searching for a job in a healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
I was searching for a new role, doing what I love. I wasn't actually having success. So 2019 was actually one of my most challenging years. I wasn't really having any success. And I can see now it's because I was being directed. I can see very clearly now a lot of what I went through and the skills I acquired in my profession, but also the education and the things that I had been devoted to really prepared me, because now here I'm working in a healthcare system. I had some experience working in healthcare, but really through a boutique consulting agency where I coached some leaders and did some training. I never worked inside.
Mm-hmm.
Months later, the pandemic hit. And it transformed my life because it also provided me an opportunity to really use all of my skills that I love and to help people that were helping people that only they could do the job. And it was such a profound experience for me. But the last thing I'll say about it is that, and how it comes back to this coming home, is that, I did not get to have a family. I did not get to have children. And that was a source of pain for me for about a decade.
Mm-hmm.
Serving at this healthcare system, I found, a couple years into it, was like the healing balm I did not ever expect to have. And it was really about me recognizing that it wasn't so much about becoming somebody else. It was about becoming more revealed. It was about becoming more aware of who I am, of that I always was caring about these certain things. It started when I was in school. I would come home and ask my mom, like, why would they say that? And what's going, I was always asking these like deeper, kind of bigger questions that really, when you're a kid, you can't
Mm-hmm.
understand yet.
Yes.
But it led me on this path. And that's essentially what I do believe. I believe that, at least as the human race as we know it today, we come into the world and we're directed on a path that's been very much driven by capitalism and industry, and isn't as much about focusing on who am I? Like, what do I care about? What am I curious about? And letting that actually be a guide. And as a result of that, I feel like we have a lot of people that are searching. And so the work that I know I'm here to do and that I choose to do and I get to do now after almost 30 years inside organizations is work with groups and work with women that are ready and are seeking that kind of that support and that mentorship and somebody who's a few steps ahead of them to help them fulfill that ache or that question that they're having, because they've already, they've done essentially their version of what I shared about my life, and they want more, and they don't want their fear of asking for more or looking selfish or all these things that I think are all part of that same dynamic to hold them back.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And it's fascinating how you just shared that, every experience that you had in your life was kind of preparing you for what you do right now, because you would not be able to give this amount of value to your clients not having had all those experiences that shaped who you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I do also liken it to an education that I happened upon in 1997 that became a master's degree program in spiritual psychology. It employed me with essentially a toolbox of helping me understand more about who I am, why I might be here, and how I could actually relate with myself in a way that is actually for me and not against me, meaning not seeing myself as asking a lot of suffering questions of like, why, but seeing more about that my time here is actually really limited. And my opportunity is to see the preciousness of my life and to honor that life. And of course, I'm still human. I'm going to have challenges. I'm going to have all the stuff that we all have. But I do think that education, I was in my late 20s when I happened to find that. I was searching for a master's program. I was searching for a program where maybe I was going to get like a marriage family therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And it became, really what it gave me was how I describe it is like an accelerated and elevated skill set on how to relate and communicate with humans. And I was just starting my leadership career at Banana Republic, and it served me very well. It served me very well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's interesting that, we all search how to relate and communicate with humans, and we should always start with ourselves, because if we do not know how to relate to ourselves, nobody can ever teach us this.
Absolutely. And I think that, that goes back to that part that I mentioned, and this is reminding me of, I'm on the TEDx journey right now where I'm applying to talks, and I'm part of a mastermind. And I'm just so grateful because it's helped me really hone at least my first message. And that is that I really believe that because of this orientation to raising a human is so different, we become very externally referenced.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, not only are we seeking answers from everything, but we're also tending to silently judge often ourselves, but then everybody else, because we're externally referenced, instead of recognizing that all of our points of leverage, all of our freedom, all of our sense of agency and sovereignty and choice is always going to come from knowing ourselves better, from understanding what we care about, what triggers us, what, like all those things. If we were just to be a little bit more neutrally observant of ourselves and study ourselves, not in this idea where it's like selfish, but it's actually how you serve the world and your life in a better way. Because if you can manage your own, like with love and consciousness, your own operating system, there's not
Yes.
a lot you can't do once you've been able to do that.
Absolutely. Very, very true. I have a feeling that your podcast, Heal Your Part, came about because of this deep feeling inside of you that you wanted to share this with people, because this podcast that you have is all about emotional healing and self-awareness and conscious leadership and reclaiming healing as a vital human skill. So could you please share a little bit, how this podcast actually reflects your own story of integration and transformation?
Absolutely. Yes. You reminded me as you were asking the question that a lot of what I have experienced growing up in the 70s, 80s, and then a career in the 90s and the early 2000s was really not being able to fully be myself, and I don't think that I'm unique in that regard, but I'll just speak from my own personal experience. And what I mean by that is all of the things that I felt naturally were important to be a part of managing people, communicating with people, creating strategy is, to me, starts from the inside out. And because of that, what I believe is a bit of a handicap, and we've trivialized mental health. We've mocked kind of things that are a little bit more deeper as this kind of, we call it woo. We've done all these things that I think then put more distance. And what I essentially feel like is happening is we're saying, oh, all these things that are very natural about being a human, because we haven't yet figured out what to do with that, let's just keep letting that elephant in the room be there, and let's just keep trying to operate alongside of it. It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
The podcast, which is called Heal Your Part, was initially what I felt is my first book. And it came through at this retreat intensive that I went through, because I finally gave myself an opportunity to let this be expressed. I just downloaded a whole, really like an overview and a table of contents of how I thought this book was going to come out. And then now that book has a different title. It's actually in the book proposal mode right now, and it's called The Beauty of Our Soul. But when I was trying to name my podcast, which is so funny because these details can sometimes really hold me back, it dawned on me one day. I'm like, oh, it's Heal Your Part, because I knew I wanted to talk about self-awareness. I wanted to talk about becoming more revealed, that becoming home to ourselves, but really from a place of, let's talk about who we are and how are we already healing, and what does healing even can it look like, and then how are we actually already doing healing work, and how are practitioners doing that, how are people doing it as advocates, and all the ways in our profession. So it was just kind of like taking the whole conversation, but instead of hiding from it, Instead of trying to still paint it a certain way that might be palatable to a larger audience, I thought, no, it's just time for me to just take a stake, put a stake in the ground and just trust myself and just call it what it is. And then it helped me name it, like, heal your part, like do your part.
Yes.
When you heal something, you do become more free. And when you become more free, everyone that's around you or near you is going to be impacted by that beautiful thing.
Very true. Yes, 100%. Yes. And then a recurring theme of your podcast and of your life probably too is that inner work isn't about fixing. It's about remembering who you are beneath the patterns. So how do you guide your listeners or clients into remembering rather than becoming someone different?
That is a really beautiful, powerful question that I will be honest and say is still being revealed to me. How I'm approaching it and is really just leaning in to my own inner guidance, is to really practice that in the experience of it. And what comes through very much right now for me is really, which has always been my intention and my practice, even sometimes I forget, is to be the presence of loving. And what that looks like in a verbal experience is like stating the obvious sometimes. That's what a leader I used to work with a long time ago, he would say that. And how I interpret that is reminding us where we came from, reminding us that when we came into this world as this little being, we weren't bridled with all the stuff that we have now. So reconnecting to that lost innocence, these layers of us, just kind of looking at it from that perspective and help create the dialogue and the moment in time to suspend and be in that place and go, oh yeah, because we all have that inner nature. We just don't give it a lot of airtime because that hasn't been a part of how we've been taught. Like my biggest heartfelt desire, I consider myself an educator, but not in the traditional sense. But when I think about the K through 12 education, it's that there would be curriculum, intentional curriculum at every single grade where you're learning more about your inner operating system. We'd have a lot more people that feel more connected to their own self-esteem, to their own emotions, to their own ability to self-regulate, to their ability to actually value themselves versus us moving into this idea that, like, oh, when you're emotional, now that means that's something bad, versus like, wait, that's like part of being alive.
Yeah, totally. Yes.
I don't know if that answers your question, but it is a work in progress. The podcast is definitely focused on interviewing people, sharing their stories, their healing journeys, the way that they doing the work in the world. And it's also me sharing like these shorty episodes where I'm bringing forward key teachings and principles and experiences. Like the last one I just published was really an inspiration of listening to my prior episode with my mentor, Kirk Souter. And it was just acknowledging this one statement he made, like looking at our antiquated ideas of reality. And that just set me off on this inner dialogue that then I decided to record and share. And it's that piece. It's that, like, let me just remind us all that this is going on for every one of us. And if you were just to take a couple of breaths and sit with that question, what would that look like for you? So it's just, I don't know if that's answering it experientially, but that's really at the heart of it.
Yes, it absolutely does. And it all goes back what you said earlier, that a lot of humans are externally referenced, and like all the experiences that we have, all the feelings that we feel, oftentimes we do not look deep inside our heart what it is truly for us personally, but we try to find answers on the outside, and there are no answers on the outside. And it seems to be like the hardest thing to break through this stereotyping and doing what everybody else does or whatever we were taught is the right thing to do. It absolutely makes sense. And yes, you responded to the question beautifully. So thank you. Thank you so much. And my last question to you, Jennifer. Your core belief is that when one person heals, the ripple shifts something beyond them. And when you heal your part, you really help shift the whole. So if Los Angeles, the city where we both live, were sitting with you as a soul in need of healing, and it asked you, what part of me do you hope I heal? And what wisdom would you want me to carry forward for the next generation? What would you share with Los Angeles?
Thank you for that question. what's present for me in this moment really is around looking our identities. I think that a lot of people, and I am Mexican American. My mother was white. My mother passed about a year ago. So my mother was white. My father's Mexican. And I believe that there needs to be a greater recognition in a way that doesn't feel like a burden or a pushing of our identities. And I often and will acknowledge that I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. I also would like for us to, because Los Angeles is likely maybe one of the most diverse cities in this country. And
in the world, probably.
yeah. And I feel like the opportunity that, like, my wish for that, I believe a lot of healing could happen in Los Angeles is if we were to postpone or put on hold for an afternoon on a regular basis, even if it's once a month, whatever we believe our identity is, because I just feel like what keeps me in check is that and I won't get too political here, but I'll just share this. I think it's important. And I do feel like it's a point of view that's coming through me that might be helpful to some. For whatever reason, I'm very grateful that I was born in this country. I'm very grateful that I feel the privilege of my own safety that a lot of other people do not have, a lot of other women do not have. And so I'm aware of that, and I'm very grateful for that. And I also don't feel possessive over it. I feel loyal to humans because I'm here, I'm in this body, and I'm a human. So when people become very nationalist, thinking, or possessive over property, even if you buy it with a banknote, we all die. Like it's not, we're renting time. That would be my wish, is that people would become a little bit more aware, open to the idea that their name and their gender and their skin color and their preferences are all just part of an identity that they were born into, but it's not who they are. It's not even all of who they are. And here you are living in a metropolis of, like, how many iterations of humans from all over the world? How much is there to learn and to connect? And I feel like the only thing that's in the way of that really materializing in a practical way is what we expose ourselves to. I liken it to, Black people. I have Black people in my life. I've dated Black men. And I feel like unless you love a Black person or have them close in your life, you don't understand. You can't fully, but you don't understand even a little bit. But if you did, if you loved somebody and you cared about them, you would become more aware, because that's what drives us.
Very true.
We are loving beings and we are touched by things, but you have to invite the experience in, or allow it in, to be touched.
Yes. And also, as you said earlier, being in the presence of loving is truly what makes us more human and helps us open our hearts to the entire world.
Absolutely. And when we what was going on here a few months back, I think that brought a lot of people forward. But I still think, like, Los Angeles is in many ways, a very privileged city. And I think that, humans get a little too comfortable in that privilege, and they're missing a whole opportunity, what it actually means to be human, what it means to be embodied, and that they happen to be, like I said, renting some time here. Our hearts are what guides us, but if we don't, like, look that way, we're going to miss it.
Yes, very true. And I think all of us need to pay attention to healing our own part, whatever that part is.
Exactly. I mean, because that's essentially what's happening when, without giving a real tangible example in this moment, because it might take too much time. I know everybody has had, I believe this, whether you're watching a movie or you're hearing, like, there was a documentary that I watched 2 years ago, and it was about the music, the people who handled all of the instruments for LAUSD. It was like a 40-minute documentary. I think it won some awards. I was watching this documentary, and there was a woman that was a key part of their story, or a true story. And her story was so profound, and she was an immigrant Mexican woman from here. I was so moved by that. I wept. And after that experience kind of settled, I thought to myself, I just want to help people. Like, it helped me reconnect to why I'm here. But my point in sharing that as an example is that when we all have that in us, and that was a healing moment for me.
Yes.
Witnessing her and integrating that and doing a little bit of self-reflection was a healing moment. And that's what Heal Your Part is.
Yes, I can see that. Well, Jennifer, Thank you so much for doing everything that you do, being of so much service to so many people, and continuing to heal your own part and little bits of your own soul, so that the ripple effect would affect everyone who you speak with. So thank you so much for doing this immense inner work for yourself and somehow vicariously for all of us.
Thank you. I so appreciate that, your reflections and your time. And thank you again for inviting me on your show.
It was such a pleasure to have you as my guest. And you make Los Angeles a more beautiful city just by being here. So thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for tuning in to explore what healing means in Los Angeles with my special guest, Jennifer Herrera. If you enjoy my podcast, In the Mood for California, please sign up for future episodes at your preferred platform, and please leave your feedback. I really appreciate your time and support. You can also follow me on Instagram at In the Mood for California and check out my website www.inthemoodforcalifornia.com. Next time, we'll head to Chatsworth to explore this unique part of Los Angeles and see how its rugged beauty has long inspired photographers and storytellers. I cannot wait to keep journeying through LA with you.
In the Mood for California. Feel the soul of Old Hollywood.